So, I, 19M, always knew I was the other kid in my family. My older sister, let's call her Rebecca, 21F, was the golden child from day one. Growing up, I remember watching her get showered with lavish gifts, praise, and attention. Meanwhile, I was lucky if I got a pat on the back for doing something good. My parents were constantly gushing over Rebecca's every little accomplishment. I mean, the girl once got a participation trophy for a school play, and they acted like she won an Oscar. It was a bit much. I, on the other hand, was usually overlooked. Like, there was this one time when I got straight A's on my report card. I was so proud, and I showed it to my parents, expecting at least a good job. But nope, they were too busy planning Rebecca's birthday party to even notice. And it wasn't just about grades or achievements. If Rebecca wanted something, she got it. New phone, designer clothes, you name it. I had to practically beg for new sneakers when mine were falling apart. It was obvious to anyone with eyes that Rebecca was the favorite. Then, there was my education. I worked my butt off in high school, ended up getting a scholarship to a pretty good university. It was a big deal for me, especially since I knew we didn't have the money to pay for college otherwise. When I told my parents, they barely reacted. It was like I had told them I was going to the local community college down the street. But when Rebecca barely scraped by with C's and managed to graduate, they threw her a massive party like she'd cured cancer or something. It was infuriating, but I learned to keep my mouth shut. Complaining never got me anywhere, and I figured I'd just focus on my future and getting out of that house. The night of my high school graduation dinner was supposed to be my moment. I'd worked so hard, and I was ready to celebrate. But, of course, Rebecca had to make it all about her. Right in the middle of the dinner, she stood up and dramatically announced that she was pregnant. Suddenly, all eyes were on her, and the focus shifted from my achievement to her pregnancy. My parents were over the moon, like she'd just given them the best news of their lives. Never mind that Rebecca didn't have a job, or that the father of her child was, well, not exactly someone you'd want as a son-in-law. Speaking of which, she finally introduced him at that dinner. The guy was a high school dropout with a sketchy past that no one wanted to talk about. But my parents? They treated him like the second coming. They even offered him a job in the family business on the spot, without even asking about his qualifications. It was unreal. Here I was, getting ready to go to college on a scholarship, and they couldn't care less. But Rebecca gets knocked up by some loser, and they're ready to hand over the keys to the kingdom. The whole situation felt like a bad joke, and I was the only one not laughing. A few weeks after the big pregnancy reveal, my parents sat me down and told me that I needed to move out. Apparently, they needed my room for the baby's nursery, and since Rebecca's boyfriend was moving in, there wasn't enough space for everyone. The kicker? They gave me 24 hours to pack my stuff and leave. I was stunned. They didn't care that I had nowhere to go. All they cared about was making room for their golden child and her baby daddy. But it didn't stop there. Rebecca, being the entitled brat she is, demanded that I hand over my car too. It wasn't exactly mine, technically, it was in my parents' name, but I was the one who used it for school and work. She also wanted my savings, claiming it was for the baby. And to top it all off, she had the nerve to suggest that I drop out of college and get a job to support them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like they all expected me to just roll over and sacrifice everything I'd worked for. But there was no way in hell I was going to do that. So there I was, 19 years old, kicked out of my own home with nothing but a backpack and no car. I ended up crashing with a friend for a few days, but I couldn't stay there forever. Eventually, I found myself living in a tent at a local campground. It was rough, to say the least. I'd wake up every morning to go to class, then head to one of my 3 part-time jobs just to keep my head above water. It was exhausting, but I was determined not to let them win. I refused to give up on my education, even though it felt like everything was working against me. Working 3 jobs while studying full-time was no joke. I barely had time to sleep, and when I did, it was usually in my car, which I managed to buy with the little savings I had left. My parents had drained most of it for Rebecca's needs, but I was able to hold on to a little bit. Every penny I earned went to paying for gas, food, and whatever else I needed to survive. It wasn't an easy life, but it was mine, and I was proud of the fact that I was making it work, despite everything they'd thrown at me. Not long after I was kicked out, I heard through people that my parents had drained even more of their savings to help Rebecca and her boyfriend. They bought them a new car, paid for all the baby stuff, and even helped them furnish the nursery that was once my bedroom. Meanwhile, I was out there struggling just to eat. But instead of letting it get to me, I used it as motivation. I threw myself into my studies and work, determined to prove that I didn't need them to succeed. I cut off all contact with my family. I figured if they didn't care about me, then I didn't need them in my life. And honestly, I felt a lot better without their constant negativity dragging me down. My focus shifted entirely to my future. I made a promise to myself that I would not only survive but thrive, and one day, they'd regret how they treated me. Update: 1 It's been a year since I got kicked out, and let me tell you, a lot has changed. After spending months juggling 3 jobs and barely scraping by, I finally caught a break. I managed to land a stable job at a local tech company, which allowed me to cut down on my other gigs. With that job, I was able to save up enough money to get out of the tent and into a small apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine, and that was all that mattered. The best part? I was still kicking butt in school. Despite everything that happened, I kept up with my studies and maintained my scholarship. It wasn't easy, there were nights where I felt like giving up, where it all felt too overwhelming. But every time I thought about how my parents and sister had written me off, I pushed through. I knew that if I wanted to get out of this mess, my education was my ticket. And it was working. My professors started to notice my dedication, and one of them even recommended me for an internship at a pretty big company. I couldn't believe it. Things were finally starting to look up. While I was busy getting my life together, things on the home weren't going so well. My parents had welcomed Rebecca's boyfriend into their home with open arms, but it wasn't long before the cracks started to show. Turns out, being a high school dropout with a shady past doesn't exactly make you the ideal houseguest. He was lazy, rude, and didn't do much to contribute. My parents had handed him a job in the family business, but he kept screwing up, and the business started losing money because of it. On top of that, Rebecca was struggling too. Taking care of a baby is no joke, and without a stable income, they were bleeding my parents dry. The excitement of the new baby wore off pretty quickly once the bills started piling up. My parents, who had always been so financially stable, were suddenly feeling the pinch. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, but honestly, I couldn't bring myself to feel too bad for them. They'd made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. Out of the blue, I got a text from Rebecca, demanding that I come to her baby shower. Not asking, demanding. She went on about how it was my duty as her brother to be there, and that I should also help out financially since she and her boyfriend were struggling. Oh, and get this, she also expected me to pitch in for her dream wedding that they were planning, despite not even being married yet. I almost laughed out loud reading her message. The audacity was unreal. Then my parents chimed in, saying that I owed them for raising me, and that it was time I stepped up to help the family. They seemed to forget that they kicked me out with nothing a year ago. I guess they figured I'd just roll over and do whatever they asked. But after everything I'd been through, there was no way I was getting sucked back into their drama. I told them a firm no, and that I was enforcing a strict no-contact boundary. It felt good to stand up for myself for once. I was done being their punching bag. After cutting off contact with my family, I threw myself into my internship. The company was well known in the industry, and this was a huge opportunity for me. I worked hard, learned a ton, and even started building some solid connections. It was a game changer. I finally felt like I was on the right path, and that all my struggles were starting to pay off. Beyond the professional stuff, I also started focusing on building healthier relationships. I made new friends, reconnected with some old ones, and even started dating again. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a support system outside of my toxic family. I realized that I didn't need them to be happy or successful. My life was my own, and I was finally taking control of it. Update 2, fast forward 3 years, and I'm proud to say that life has turned out pretty damn good. I finished my degree, and thanks to the internship I nailed, I landed a dream job right after graduation. The pay was great, and for the first time ever, I felt financially stable. I upgraded to a nicer apartment, started saving for the future, and even treated myself to a few things I'd always wanted but could never afford. It was a huge turnaround from where I was just a few years ago. On top of that, I was happy. Genuinely happy. I had a solid group of friends, a great job, and I was even in a relationship with someone who actually valued and respected me. Looking back, it was crazy to think how much things had changed. I'd gone from sleeping in a tent and working 3 jobs to living comfortably and building a career I was proud of. And the best part? I'd done it all on my own, without any help from my so-called family. While I was thriving, my family was not. From what I heard through mutual contacts, things had gone from bad to worse back home. My parents had blown through their retirement fund trying to support Rebecca and her boyfriend, who, surprise surprise, still wasn't contributing much. The family business was tanking, thanks in part to his incompetence, and they were on the brink of bankruptcy. But the real kicker? Rebecca's boyfriend had been cheating on her, with her best friend, no less. When the truth came out, it was a total disaster. Rebecca was devastated, and my parents were furious, but it was too late to undo the damage. He took off, leaving Rebecca to deal with the mess he'd created. She was now a single mother, struggling to keep it together, and my parents were drowning in debt with no way out. Just when I thought I was done with all their drama, my family decided to pull one last stunt. One day, out of nowhere, they showed up at my workplace. I hadn't seen them in years, so to say I was shocked would be an understatement. They walked in like everything was normal, completely ignoring the fact that we hadn't spoken in 3 years. They immediately started laying it on thick about how much they missed me and how we should put the past behind us. But I wasn't buying it. I knew they weren't there out of some sudden burst of familial love. After some awkward small talk, they got to the point. They were broke, Rebecca was struggling, and they wanted me to help them out financially. They even asked if they could move in with me, just until they got back on their feet. I couldn't believe the nerve. As they rambled on about how families should stick together, I just stood there, stunned. After everything they'd put me through, they really thought they could just waltz back into my life and start making demands? I let them finish their talk, then calmly told them that there was no way I was going to help them. I reminded them of how they kicked me out and left me to fend for myself, and that I'd managed just fine without them. I also made it crystal clear that I wasn't interested in reconnecting or playing happy family again. They tried to guilt trip me, saying things like, "But we're your family, and you owe us for everything we've done for you." But I wasn't having it. I told them that they made their choice years ago when they chose Rebecca over me, and now they had to live with the consequences. I wished them luck, but firmly told them to leave and not contact me again. It was harsh, but it needed to be said. As they walked out, I felt a sense of relief. I was done with them, for good this time. Update 3, after I refused to help my family, I figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Instead of accepting my decision and moving on, they decided to retaliate, big time. It started with them bad-mouthing me to anyone who would listen. Suddenly, social media was filled with posts from my parents and Rebecca, painting me as the selfish, ungrateful child who abandoned his family in their time of need. They twisted the story to make it seem like I was the villain, conveniently leaving out the part where they'd kicked me out at 19 so they could move in Rebecca's boyfriend. At first, I tried to ignore it. But the posts kept coming, getting nastier and more personal. They even dragged my friends into it, tagging them in posts and spreading lies about me. It was ridiculous. But what really crossed the line was when they started harassing me at work. My parents would call my office repeatedly, leaving messages with my coworkers, claiming it was a family emergency. Rebecca even showed up one day, causing a scene in the lobby, demanding to see me. It was humiliating, and it was clear they were trying to ruin my reputation and make my life as difficult as possible. I knew I had to do something before things got even more out of hand. After seeing all the advice on Reddit urging me to take legal action, I finally decided to pursue a restraining order against them. Honestly, I should have done this earlier, but a part of me still hesitated because they were my only family. But their recent behavior showed me that I needed to protect myself, even if it meant taking legal steps against them. Before filing, I gathered all the evidence I could, screenshots of their social media posts, records of the calls, and even footage from my workplace's security cameras showing Rebecca causing a scene. I also decided to share my side of the story publicly. I posted everything online, detailing the real history and why I cut ties with them in the first place. I made sure to include the proof so people could see that I wasn't just making things up. The response was overwhelming. Most people were supportive, and my family's smear campaign quickly backfired. They were exposed for what they really were, toxic and manipulative. The restraining order was granted, and they were legally barred from contacting me or showing up at my workplace again. It was a huge relief, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe without constantly looking over my shoulder. Getting the restraining order didn't stop them from trying to worm their way back into my life, though. My parents started facing legal consequences for the harassment, and they were desperate. Their financial situation had gotten worse, and with the business on the brink of collapse, they were scrambling for any way out. But no one wanted to help them after the truth came out. Their reputation was in tatters, and even their close friends and extended family began to distance themselves. Rebecca, on the other hand, was finally facing the reality of her situation. With her boyfriend gone and her social circle shrinking, she had no one left to lean on. The entitlement that once worked in her favor was now pushing people away. Even her so-called friends began to see through her act, especially after everything was laid bare online. She tried reaching out to me one last time, but I didn't respond. I had nothing left to say to her. Update 4, 5 years have passed since I last had any contact with my family. In that time, I've built a life I'm proud of, secure job, a home I love, and relationships that are supportive and healthy. But life hasn't been so kind to my parents and Rebecca. Their lives have completely fallen apart, and from what I've heard, it's been a downhill spiral. My parents' business eventually collapsed. With no savings left, and no income from the failing business, they lost their house. They've been bouncing between different relatives' couches, but even that goodwill has worn thin. Most of the family has cut them off because they're tired of the constant drama and financial begging. It's a far cry from the comfortable life they once had, and from what I hear, they're struggling just to get by. Rebecca, meanwhile, is raising her child as a single mother. She never managed to hold down a stable job, and without my parents' financial support, she's barely scraping by. The boyfriend she once thought was her ticket to an easy life is long gone, and she's had to face the harsh reality that her entitlement doesn't pay the bills. The same friends who once adored her have drifted away, tired of her constant demands and drama. She's isolated, struggling, and from what I hear, deeply unhappy. A few months ago, out of the blue, I got a call from an aunt I hadn't spoken to in years. She told me that my parents were in dire straits and had asked her to reach out to me on their behalf. They were desperate for help, and according to her, they were willing to do anything to make things right. My aunt urged me to meet with them, saying they were truly sorry for everything that happened. I agreed to meet, more out of curiosity than anything else. When I saw them, I was shocked by how much they'd aged. They looked defeated, nothing like the confident, controlling people I once knew. They begged me to help them, saying they had nowhere else to turn. They even tried to guilt trip me, talking about how they were my parents, and how family should be there for each other. But I didn't feel any sympathy. They had their chance to be a family to me, and they blew it. I told them flat out that I wasn't going to help them. I reminded them of how they kicked me out without a second thought, how they drained my savings and tried to ruin my life. I wasn't going to bail them out now just because they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. I walked out of that meeting with a clear conscience, knowing I'd made the right decision. In the years that followed, I occasionally heard updates about my family from mutual acquaintances. My parents ended up having to declare bankruptcy, and they lost what little they had left. Rebecca continued to struggle, bouncing from job to job, unable to find any stability. It was ironic, really. They'd spent so much of their lives putting Rebecca on a pedestal and treating me like I didn't matter, only for her to end up in such a bad place while I thrived. Some people might call it karma. I don't know if I believe in that, but it's hard not to see it that way. They made their choices, and now they're paying the price. As for me, I'm at peace. I've built a life that's far better than anything I could have imagined when I was living in that tent. I'm successful, happy, and surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. I'm proof that you don't need toxic family members in your life to succeed. You just need the determination to rise above the circumstances and make something of yourself, no matter what life throws at you. Looking back on everything, I can't say I regret the way things turned out. It was tough, no doubt, but it shaped me into the person I am today. I've learned to value myself and to surround myself with people who lift me up rather than tear me down. I've learned that family isn't always about blood, it's about who's there for you when things get rough. I don't have any plans to reconnect with my parents or Rebecca. They made their choices, and I've made mine. I'm focusing on my future, my career, and the people who have been there for me through thick and thin. I've moved on, and I'm not looking back. As far as I'm concerned, the past is the past, and my life is only going forward from here.